Here are mechanics in this country who will turn down work. Not because they're lazy, not because they don't need the money, but because the moment they see which car is pulling into their bay, they already know what's coming. Hours of disassembly just to reach one bolt. Parts that cost twice what they should. Systems so tangled together that fixing one thing breaks 3 others. And the customer standing at the front desk with no idea why their repair bill looks like a mortgage payment. This is a story about the cars that built that reality, and why the people who know them best want nothing to do with them. Hey, this is Mark, and you're welcome to AUTOSAYS. If that already surprised you, stay with me. Hit subscribe so you don't miss where this goes. Let's start with something that rarely gets said out loud. The repair industry in America generates over $400 billion a year. That's not a typo. $400 billion. And a significant chunk of that money flows directly from one simple problem: cars that were designed without the mechanic in mind. Some of those cars are popular, some of them are beloved, and some of them are sitting in driveways across the country right now, slowly becoming very expensive problems. But before we get into which brands earn that reputation, we need to understand how we got here. Because it didn't happen by accident. In the 1990s and early 2000s, the American car market went through a strange transformation. Responded, but not always wisely. They started cramming electronics, sensors, and luxury features into vehicles that weren't originally built to hold them. The engine bay shrunk, the components got tighter, and the labor time on basic repairs, things that used to take 45 minutes, started stretching to 4 hours. Dealerships didn't mind. Longer labor time meant higher bills. But independent mechanics? They started noticing something that would shape the next 2 decades of the industry. Some brands were consistently worse, not by a little, by a lot. Here's where it gets uncomfortable. Because the brands we're talking about aren't obscure. They're not budget brands with no resources. Several of them are premium names. Cars that cost $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 new. Cars that people buy because they want reliability and refinement. And the cruel irony is this: the more expensive the badge, the more complex the engineering, and in some cases, the worse the experience when something goes wrong. Let's talk about one that mechanics bring up constantly: Land Rover. Now, Land Rover owners are some of the most passionate people in the automotive world. They love the brand. They love what it represents: capability, adventure, British heritage. And that passion is real. But there's a phrase that circulates quietly in the mechanic community, and it goes like this: a Range Rover is just a BMW in an expensive disguise, and neither one wants to be fixed easily. The partnership between Land Rover and BMW-derived powertrains created a situation where parts cross multiple manufacturer lines, and not in a clean way. Air suspension systems that are electronically integrated with the drivetrain. Transfer cases that require software calibration to replace properly, and a body structure that, particularly in older Discovery and Range Rover models, requires so much disassembly for routine maintenance that some shops simply refuse the work unless they can bill accordingly. A senior mechanic in Texas put it plainly in a trade forum a few years back. He said, and I'm paraphrasing, "I once spent 6 hours on a job that should have taken 1.5, because Land Rover engineers apparently designed the car from the inside out and forgot that someone eventually has to get in there." He stopped accepting Land Rover appointments. He wasn't alone. But here's the thing that makes this story more than just a mechanic's complaint. Land Rover's reliability issues aren't just inconvenient. They're financially documented. In the UK, surveys of used car ownership costs repeatedly place Land Rover near the top for unexpected annual repair spend. In the American market, independent reliability trackers show that certain model years carry a failure rate that's 2 to 3 times the segment average. And yet, and this is the fascinating part, Land Rover sales have remained strong. Because the brand psychology is so powerful that it overrides the data. People want what the badge represents. Even when the badge comes with hidden costs, they don't fully understand until year 3. That's the psychology of aspiration working against the consumer. And it's not unique to Land Rover. Let's talk about another name that comes up in these conversations, one that might actually surprise you more. Fiat Chrysler products, particularly Dodge and Jeep in certain generations, carry a complicated reputation in the independent shop world. And the reason is specific. It's not that every Dodge is a nightmare, it's that when they go wrong, the electrical architecture can be genuinely unpredictable. Chrysler's cost-cutting periods, particularly in the early and mid-2000s, produced a generation of vehicles where the wiring harness design was, to put it charitably, optimistic. Connectors that corrode, ground points that fail intermittently, instrument cluster behavior that sends mechanics chasing phantom faults for hours, and perhaps most frustratingly, diagnostic trouble codes that point in one direction while the actual problem sits somewhere else entirely. This isn't speculation. It's a documented pattern that led many experienced technicians to start requiring diagnostic deposits before accepting certain Jeep and Dodge models, charging for the investigation time before any actual repair begins. The Jeep Grand Cherokee in particular, across multiple generations, shows up repeatedly in these conversations. And what makes it complex is that the platform has genuine strengths. The 404 systems are genuinely capable. Certain engine options are robust, but the electrical integration around those mechanical components, the modules, the controller area network architecture, the software dependencies, that's where the hours go, and where the money goes with them. Now here's a name that might seem out of place on this list. BMW. BMW is a prestige brand, precision engineering, motorsport heritage. And in terms of how the car drives, those things are real. The engineering philosophy that goes into a BMW powertrain, particularly in the M Sport and inline-six applications, produces a driving experience that very few manufacturers can match. But there's a price to that engineering, and mechanics see it every time a BMW reaches a certain mileage. The cooling system, the timing chain and tensioner assemblies on N-series engines, the high-pressure fuel pump failures on early direct injection models, the Vanos system wear that produces rough, idle and poor response around 80,000 miles. These are not rare edge cases. These are patterns, consistent, documented, predictable patterns that show up so reliably that experienced BMW technicians have entire diagnostic sequences memorized for them. The problem isn't that BMW makes failures inevitable. The problem is that when failures arrive, the labor access on many of these components requires engine removal or near full disassembly of the front end. A cooling system job on certain 3 Series models can run 12 hours of labor. Not because the job is complicated, because getting to it is. BMW knows this. And here's something that rarely gets discussed. BMW's dealer network in the United States has consistently ranked among the most expensive for routine maintenance, not just major repairs, oil changes that require specialty oil grades, brake fluid flushes that are tied to service indicator systems, filters and wear items that are designed for the dealer-specific toolset, not the independent shop. There is a financial architecture built into BMW ownership that is largely invisible at the point of sale and fully revealed around year 4. But then there's a brand that mechanics argue about more than any other. And it's a brand that sits at the opposite end of the price spectrum from BMW and Land Rover. It's a brand that millions of people trust with their daily commute, their family road trips, their 200,000-mile reliability dreams. That brand is Volkswagen. Here's where the story gets really interesting, because Volkswagen's reputation in the mechanic world is deeply, almost violently divided. On one side, you have the technicians who have mastered the platform, who love the engineering precision, who've invested in the VCDS diagnostic tools, who understand how the timing belt intervals work on the TDI engines and why they matter. These mechanics will defend Volkswagen passionately. They've made it part of their identity. On the other side, you have the mechanics who tried to work on a Volkswagen without that specialized knowledge and got burned. And there are a lot of them. The issue with Volkswagen isn't that the cars are badly built. In many ways, they're beautifully engineered. The issue is that they're engineered in a very German, very specific way. And that way does not always translate easily to American independent shops. The cam follower failure on the 2.0T FSI engine. The timing chain stretch on the early TSI motors. The DSG dual-clutch transmission requiring fluid services that many owners and even some mechanics don't know about. The DPF systems on diesel models that require regeneration processes misunderstood by nearly everyone outside the VW ecosystem. And then there was Dieselgate, which didn't just damage Volkswagen financially, though it did to the tune of over $30 billion in settlements. It damaged the relationship between the brand and a large segment of the American consumer base in a way that has not fully recovered. When a manufacturer is revealed to have deliberately programmed vehicles to cheat emissions tests, software designed specifically to deceive, it changes how people think about everything else the brand does, including what's happening inside the car that's sitting in a repair bay right now. Trust, once lost at that scale, doesn't come back easily. So what does a smart mechanic actually do with all of this? Here's the answer that surprises people. The best mechanics don't refuse these brands out of frustration. They specialize in them strategically. Because the same complexity that makes Land Rover, BMW, and VW difficult, that same complexity creates a skills barrier. And skills barriers mean higher rates. A technician who has genuinely mastered BMW electrical diagnostics, who has the equipment, the training, the experience, they can charge accordingly because the alternatives are limited. The mechanics who refuse aren't the ones who understand the platform. They're the ones who have tried to work on it without that foundation. The lesson isn't that these cars are unfixable. The lesson is that they punish unprepared hands in ways that cheaper, simpler platforms never would. And there's a lesson in that for the buyer too. Because when you purchase a car, you're not just buying the vehicle. You're buying into its entire ownership ecosystem. The parts supply chain, the specialist availability in your area, the diagnostic software requirements, the labor hour realities. A car that's $15,000 cheaper to buy can easily cost $20,000 more to own over a decade if that ecosystem is broken, expensive, or simply absent in your city. That's not a scare story. That's math. And the mechanics who've been doing this for 20 years will tell you, the people who understand that math before they buy are the ones who come back with the same car for 15 years. Everyone else cycles through ownership frustration and wonders why cars keep costing them more than they expected. The cars that smart mechanics avoid aren't the worst cars ever made. Some of them are genuinely brilliant machines. But brilliance without accessibility is a very particular kind of trap. And the repair bay is where that trap finally closes. So here's what I want to leave you with. Next time you're looking at a vehicle, any vehicle, ask one question that almost nobody asks at the dealership. Ask, what does this car cost to fix? And who in my area is actually qualified to fix it? That question will tell you more about true ownership cost than any window sticker ever will. Which brand on this list surprised you most? Drop it in the comments, because based on what you drive, the answers are going to be very different. And if you want to know about the car brands that mechanics actually love, the platforms they recommend to their own families when no one's watching. That story is coming next, and you might not expect which names make that list.